We begin in Ukraine, where the former actor and comedian Volodymyr Zelensky has just been sworn in as president. In his first statement at his inauguration, Zelensky said he would dissolve parliament and hold new elections. The political novice takes over after defeating Petro Poroshenko in a landslide victory last month. His supporters see him as breaking with the previous political establishment, but critics fear his inexperience could be exploited by neighboring Russia. DW's Nick Connolly joins us now from outside the Ukrainian parliament in Kiev. Nick, what did the new president have to say in his inauguration speech? What priorities has he set for himself?
Well, good morning, Terry. It started off very conventionally, lots of pomp and ceremony, the anthem being sung several times, the great seal of state being handed over, words about unity, keeping the country together. And then he dropped a bombshell. He not only said he would be dissolving Parliament with immediate effect to the very faces of the members of Parliament who face a very tough election for them, given that Zelensky is riding high in the polls. He also said they now had 2 months to pass a law stripping themselves of immunity from prosecution, and also to pass a new law that would make getting back into Parliament for many of them much harder, a new law on proportional representation. And he fired the head of Ukraine's security service, who was sitting in the podium a couple of metres away from him. So lots of very stray expressions of incredulity on the faces of Ukraine's elites, who really had been expecting something a little more conventional. And he says that given that today, Monday, is a working day, they should get straight to work. Now, there are loopholes here. He might not get the elections he's hoping for, but he really has started off with all guns blazing.
So Volodymyr Zelensky starting off with a bang there as Ukraine's new president. Well, as the new leader of the country, Zelensky will face many challenges. Let's take a closer look now at the man who has just taken over the reins of power.
It was a result that even Zelensky himself seemingly couldn't quite believe. 73%, almost 3/4 of Ukrainian voters, had put their trust in him, the political newbie. A man who had only announced his intention to run just a few months before. A face familiar to almost all Ukrainians from television, but someone who had never been involved in politics, let alone run for office. For incumbent Petro Poroshenko, it was a stinging defeat, losing to Zelensky in all but one of Ukraine's regions. His pitch to the nation as commander-in-chief, as the man who had kept Ukraine and its army together in the face of Russian aggression, had fallen on deaf ears. In the weeks since his sensational victory, Zelensky has kept out of the limelight, making only a handful of appearances, most of them on social media, as Ukraine's parliament squabbled over the timing of the inauguration. But what is it that Ukrainians are really expecting their new president to do?
I've voted for him. I don't really know what to expect, but I'm hoping for the best. I've had enough of all the old faces in politics. I hope he defeats corruption in our country. That's the main thing.
We support Zelensky. Let's see what to expect from him as president.
In his fictional inauguration as president in the series Servant of the People, Zelensky charms his audience by throwing stuffy protocol overboard and refusing to speak or behave like a politician. Whether the real President Zelensky will manage to pull off the same feat, only time will tell. But one thing is already clear. He's captured the country's imagination, and he won't be the last show business star weighing in on Ukraine's politics. As the country's most famous rock musician says he too plans to launch a new party.
So Volodymyr Zelensky is a familiar face, but he has no political experience. Nick, what qualities do Ukrainians see in him that they think will make him a good leader?
Well, Terry, to put it bluntly, I think the main quality for most voters was the fact that he wasn't part of the old elite. He wasn't Petro Poroshenko. I think this was mainly a vote against Poroshenko, the incumbent, and the old political class, who were also all of the same generation and had been on people's TV screens for decades. Zelensky really selling a promise of hope, of change, of bringing a new approach to politics, rather than going into too much detail of the nitty-gritty of politics. Voters seemingly weren't really interested in that. They were definitely concerned about low standards of living and the corruption that has led to Ukraine failing to make good on its huge potential and keeping people in such poverty. So those are the main themes, but I think it's more about a mood and a feeling and a desire for change rather than anything too concrete.
So you mentioned a number of domestic issues, and the new president has come in with guns blazing, as you said, already dissolving parliament. But what about Russia? Any idea how Ukraine's new president intends to approach those testy relations with Russia?
Well, in his speech just a couple of minutes ago, he addressed the Ukrainian citizens in Crimea and in Donbass, and said that his main priority would be bringing an end to hostilities in the east of Ukraine, that Donbass conflict where Ukraine faces Russian-backed separatists. There had been speculation, mainly from his political opponents, that he would be a soft touch, that he would be someone easy to manipulate for Vladimir Putin as a more experienced political operator. I think it's going to be difficult for him to make any concessions to Russia, even if he wanted to, because Ukrainian society, after these 5 years of conflict with Russia over Donbass, over Crimea, has really shifted in the way ordinary people here see Russia. There was one candidate in the elections who visited Moscow before the election. He came in 4th place. I think in modern Ukraine, being seen as too chummy with the Kremlin is not something that pays off at the ballot box or with public opinion. So I think that's going to be very limited, the scope there for any closeness to Russia. More broadly, he is concerned, though, to reach out to Russian-speaking Ukrainians, to people who felt they've been maybe neglected at a time where Ukrainian language and the kind of building of Ukraine's cultural nation building has really been a focus. And he actually made a point of speaking in Russian for parts of his speech, something that would have been unthinkable for Poroshenko. So I think there's going to be a change of stylistics, mainly directed towards Russian speakers within Ukraine, but Russia and the Kremlin, I think, is still taboo for Ukraine, given that we are in a state of conflict over Donbass, over Crimea.
Nick, thank you very much. DW's Nick Connolly there in Kiev.